Tell us about your upbringing. You had two very smart parents from the sound of it.
Well, I grew up in Glasgow, in Scotland. I was very fortunate in my parents. My father and mother were the first in their families to go to university. Hence my earlier remarks before the break about the importance of social mobility through education. My father managed to become a doctor. He was a dedicated internist all through my childhood, tremendously devoted to his work, regarded work as a vocation. And my mother was a physicist, a physics teacher. My father died a few years ago, but my mum is still alive and living in England. And I owe them everything. Without them, and of course, without my grandparents who produced them, I would be nothing and would have achieved nothing. They gave me their genes, but they also gave me something else, which is the kind of upbringing that I try to give my own children, in which they instilled me with sense of responsibility, of good fortune, and a sense that one should never waste that good fortune. And I try not to waste the good luck I've been given.
Now, one thing they did not give you was a belief in any particular religion. And what was your mom's line about how the universe was created or what we're doing here? It was some great line.
Well, my mother and father both left the Church of Scotland really on, I think, the principle that Glasgow and much of Scotland was afflicted by sectarian division. This was the great curse of the part of the world where I grew up. Catholics and Protestants not only hating and despising one another, but in Northern Ireland, of course, engaging in violence. And I think that was a big part of the reason that my parents stopped going to church. But my mother was also a kind of committed atheist. She loved to tell me and my sister that life was a cosmic accident, and that in that sense, one shouldn't expect the world or indeed the cosmos to revolve around us. It was all a kind of combination of Newtonian physics and Darwinian evolution, and that was how I was raised. We didn't go to church, although there was a chapel, there was a religious element to my education. I always felt somewhat detached from it, and as I said, Glasgow, in a sectarian society like Glasgow's, there was a Catholic football team, Celtic, and a Protestant football team, Rangers. But I found the atheist football team, Partick Thistle, and the joke always was that, if you do believe in God, when you start supporting Partick Thistle, you'll soon stop. So that was my background.
It's funny. It's all coming together for me. In New York, there's this thing called the Kelly Gang, and it's a bunch of media personalities and some other well-known Kellys. And we raise money for charity. And we get together on St. Patrick's Day every year. And I remember saying to Ray Kelly, who was the police commissioner for a while, and Greg Kelly's dad, I said, what's the story? Like, how does one get into the Kelly Gang? What am I doing here? And he said, well, there are 3 rules. He said, you got to have some juice. You gotta, oh God, what was the second thing? Gotta have some juice. Gotta have something. Said there was a second thing. It'll come to me. And he said, and the third thing is, you can't have that second E. To your point about, because with those of us without the second E are Catholics.
Yeah, that kind of thing mattered a lot where I grew up, and I still always marvel at the great self-confidence of the Irish Americans, and vaguely grind my teeth at the thought of the way that back in the day they tended to sympathize with the Provisional IRA, who were conducting terrorist operations in Northern Ireland and the UK. So that background kind of creates a certain wariness about religion, because it got so associated with politics and indeed at times with violence, and certainly was associated with prejudice. So I completely get why my parents took that approach. I found that when I left Scotland and studied history, I became less and less convinced of atheism as a way of life, or indeed as a way to organize a society. And so these days, you'll find me a regular attender at church.
So I love this.
Who has
because you believe in observance, if not true belief. So tell us how, why? What are you doing with your children, and how did you get to that place?
Well, I think, and I have 5 children. I felt this in for all of them, that one should at least educate children about religion. And as we are a society that came out of Christianity, it's extremely important that you understand what that is. So there's that part, but there's also a sense in which a life without spirituality is at some level a life with a missing piece. I think that G.K. Chesterton said something very true. He didn't quite say this, but that's usually how it's quoted. The trouble with atheism is not that men believe in nothing; it's that they'll believe in anything. And so if you kind of opt out of religion, it's quite possible that something else, might be crazy conspiracy theories, will fill it. Or it might be a secular religion like Marxism. So I've kind of come to the view that even if I don't have a strong spiritual impulse and struggle a bit to have belief in God, I do think it's important to have a part of your life that is devoted to spiritual reflection. I think going to church is good for you. It is good to think about Christ's teaching. It's good to be part of that tradition. Apart from anything else, Christ has some very radical things to teach us about how to be good, how to treat our fellow human beings. And I think that's something I want my children to know. We're definitely not naturally good. I mean, I don't think that we have evolved to be ethical. I think that's something that society has to drum into people somehow. And over time, I've come to feel that this is a really important part of our lives. Now, this, of course, raises the thorny question of how does Ayan feel? Because, of course, my wife is a
she was raised
Muslim.
in the Muslim Brotherhood.
She went through a period in her life when she was not only a devout Muslim, but had been radicalized by the Muslim Brotherhood. She too became an atheist, but by a very different route from me. And we find ourselves a most unusual family. Both these atheists have arrived at a consensus that we should go to church on Sunday. And we took a while to find the right church. Northern California has strangely politicized kind of a religion. I got very turned off by church services, which included a mandatory anti-Trump sermon. But there's a wonderfully traditional Anglican church that we now attend, which uses the traditional order of service and avoids altogether politics in the sermons. And this is a source of considerable satisfaction to me, and I think is good for us as a family, good for the kids, and they can make up their own minds as they grow up what they want to do. But my eldest son was recently married in London last
saw some pictures
December.
Of that. Yeah, Ayan sent me a couple of those pictures. You had your traditional Scottish dress on.
I had my kilt on, as did nearly all the Ferguson boys. The bridegroom himself opted not to, because he was marrying an English girl, and I think felt it might be just a little bit too much of a good thing if we all were decked out like Sean Connery in our kilts. But this was a religious service in an Anglican chapel, and a beautiful thing. And the great thing about Anglicanism is the aesthetics are so good. I mean, you may not have very uplifting spiritual impulses, but you can enjoy the music if nothing else, and that's itself meaningful.
Experts say that China is hoarding a massive amount of food. They will soon have over 2/3 of the globe's corn reserves, over half of its rice, and over half of its wheat. But when asked about it, China misleads. One China expert says they, of course, would never admit to something like that. Well, what does China know that we do not? When it comes to global food shortages, China may be the canary in the coal mine. You see, China's the world's #1 food importer. They rely on the rest of the world to keep their people fed, so they cannot afford to mess it up, or there could be civil unrest, or worse. That's why it's a smart idea to stock up on a kit of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. Hand-packed in the USA, the kits are compact and stack easily. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, and dinners. And their 5-star reviews on the website rave about the flavor and the taste. Right now, you can get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food by typing in the code MK at checkout. Just go to 4patriots.com. Use that code MK to get 10% off your first purchase of 4 Patriots survival food. 4patriots.com. Use code MK. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.